Hello and welcome to the Attack Angle. I am Tom Dimitrov, along with Matt Kelly, Jay Lasley, Eric Bounds, and we got a special treat this week. We got Coach Rick Howard from Lambert High School. Coach, how are you doing?
Doing great. I want to thank you guys for having me.
Well, this is awesome. We're excited. This is another treat for ourselves because we get to learn some exciting information about creating the culture of baseball inside of your program, what it means, how to develop it, things that you've experienced over time. And we're just super excited to get to hear your insight. Real quick, could you just run down through kind of your past of where you started, your coaching experience, and where you're at now?
Sure. Very fortunate. Been some great places, been around some great people. I was at Brookwood High School for 21 years. I was assistant there for 10, pitching coach for those 10, and then got named head coach. Very fortunate in those 11 years to be head coach at Brookwood. Out of nowhere, just decided to create a challenge for myself, and job came open, put in for it, and ended up at Lambert. So we've been there 6 years now. So it's been good. It's been really, really good. It's been good on me. It's taught me a lot, and I'm better for it.
So let's kind of dive into it, because you started off at Brookwood, and today's whole thing is kind of creating that culture inside of a program. And what it takes, and what your beliefs are, what your concrete beliefs are, what you want to build those players on. And you started off, you said, as the pitching coach for 10 years, and then you transitioned to the head coach. Now, your 10 years as the pitching coach, how was that in relation? How did that help? How did that hurt? Or was there things that you saw that you really took forward with you? Or were there things that you were just like, this just doesn't work and I got to change it? So just talk a little bit that transition of those 10 years as the pitching coach and then getting the job as a head coach, and kind of what that was like.
Sure. I was very fortunate to assist two great guys, in Tom Jones and Doug Jones, and two very different individuals, but two classy individuals. But I learned a great deal from both of them. I'll tell you, I think the thing that I took the most, both were successful and both did things in a very different way. And I realized probably early on, first year, probably even my second year as head coach, is that one thing that I needed to do was I needed to do it my way. The way Doug was doing wasn't going to work for me, and the way Tom did it wasn't going to work for me. My personality was different than both of them. While we may have had some philosophical agreements, we saw things just because of our personalities being different. So I learned very early that I was going to have to do this with my personality and with my thought process. And so I think that helped me the most in my first couple of years as a head coach. Wasn't anything necessarily I saw as a pitching coach that, as far as changes, I just kind of took from both of them and put them into how they would work for me. Tom was stern. He always came across as no nonsense. That wasn't necessarily him behind closed doors, but I got that feeling. And I got Doug, a great baseball knowledge, a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of energy, passion for the game. And so I took both of those and kind of created and took my personality and mended all those things together.
So you step into the role, and you've had these two great coaches ahead of you, and now you start creating your idea of what the culture of the program, how you see it, how you believe it should be run, and kind of what you put in your notes from the Georgia Dugout Convention that you were going to present with and that you let us look into is the culture you identified as the simplest way to do things. So
Yes.
just kind of talk about some of those things that are simple that you felt like you needed to instill into the program to kind of make it your own. I mean, that was one thing that Coach Strickland from last week with Coach, when he was going to Marist, was he was like, I got to be me. I can't worry about the guy in front of me or the guy that was behind me or whatever it may be. I have to do it my way. So if you could just kind of walk us through some of those simplest things that you knew from your personality that you really wanted to instill into your program?
Sure. I think probably for me, I always had the belief that if you create that simple, you know, thought process, if you create that, kids are going to go from there. And that's what you want. You want your kids to take that basic and then mold it into what it is they want for themselves as a group. And each group is different. Every year it's different. You got different leaders, you got different players, you got different scenarios. There's things that culminate in a course of a year that create that personality of that team. I wanted to make sure that what I was doing was just creating that base level. Hey, this is where we are. All right. From that base level, these are the kind of things that we want out of our kids. And then from there, let them take off. So when I was doing this and trying to set this up, you know, and I'll be honest with you, culture, we had culture at Brookwood. I don't think it was ever something that we went overboard about. For me, it was always about a system. Let's create a system. If we create this system for these kids know how things unfold. As a freshman, they're going to come in and these things are going to be asked of them. Our pitchers are going to throw 3 pitches. They're going to be able to throw those in the zone. We're going to do a great job with our pitch. We're going to be fundamentally sound. We're going to run our bunt coverages exactly the way we want to. We're going to play small ball. We're going to play to our field. Our field was big gaps. That's how we played the game there. And so as we created that system, those basic things as freshmen, they took on as sophomores, and then we tried to expand them. Each year, you try to get a little bit more out of those kids. My biggest thing that I think I always told our kids was that, listen, our goal is to get the most out of you. That's our whole purpose in here is create that player that you're capable of, because we're all not willing to push ourselves to that extent. So sometimes we got to we need somebody to mold us into that.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask.
No, go ahead.
So at Brookwood, across the street, across the road, down the road, whatever, is Parkview, who has this long success of tradition of winning, and everybody knows. How was that? How was there a struggle with did people expect you guys to be like Parkview, or was there I'm sure there's a lot of competitive tension between you guys, but kind of what was that kind of like as you were building into this program?
I'll be honest with you. I think, number one, I'll tell you this, that's one of the greatest rivalries I've ever been a part of, and truly one of the best things that you could have ever been a part of. One of the things I truly miss. I think it was one of my motivational factors. I think when I got there, we struggled every year against Parkview. Matter of fact, in our first 4 years, I don't think we ever beat them. Doug comes over from Parkview, and we start creating a little success. Obviously, in his first year, we played for a state championship in '99. So we had some success all the way around. So that kind of triggered that, hey, Brookwood's there. Now, you have to understand, Brookwood won a state championship in '86. And then we had a couple of years that were a little bit down. And so we were kind of going through this cycle. Well, it's frustrating in that community. And we competed in all sports against each other. But baseball has struggled. Parkview, under Coach Buchanan, which always tremendously admired him from a distance, solid every year solid, just constant. So we're trying to compete with that. And there was a little back and forth through Doug's years. And when I took over, that was the key thing. And for us, it was trying to change the mindset of, all right, listen, because when I got there, kids were afraid to play Parkview. I can say that now. That was 20-something years ago. There was a mindset there that was like, hey, they weren't competing. It wasn't that they were that much more talented than us. There was a mental part of it. So that was one thing that we tried to change. When I took over, first year in '05 was not very successful. Of course, they had some dudes, and we were competing against that in the second year. So the mindset was the biggest thing that we had to change early on in my first couple of years. In '07, we started having some success, and we end up winning the region. And that just really, I can't tell you what that does to a program when you've kind of have that success. And it wasn't they were down, they were still very good. We ended up going in '07 and playing in the semis. And so that just kind of propelled us and changed a little bit. And that'll do a lot for culture. There's no question. You got some success, it does a lot for a culture because it creates all of those things you need to be successful. How you play the game, the stories, the history, everything goes on. And then '08 again, we win the region. And so we kind of changed that tide. '09, I think we split, and then we kind of fell off a little bit. In '12, we come back and we play for a state championship against Parkview. They beat us, and they beat us in the state championship, but we beat them twice during the season in the region.
Yeah.
So, that was a big thing that I was so proud of our kids, is that I felt like we had changed, not just in Parkview, but you guys will remember, East Cobb and that part of it in Cobb County baseball was, the elite, and we were turning it around to be able to compete on that level. And I was happy for our kids because our kids bought into that.
Now, Coach, I've got a question for you when it comes to a big rival.
Yeah.
And I've asked this of other coaches. Some coaches will take that rivalry on, and that's their main focus, and they push that rivalry to their kids. Other coaches have taken the approach of let's treat that rivalry like another game. And I've heard both coaches talk about they found success by addressing it that way. When it comes to a rival for you, do you try to get your kids to treat it like this is just another game? Or do you treat it like this is our crosstown rival? This is a live and die situation for us?
Well, for me, and I think this was more of the culture that we were building, and I don't know that we really thought about it. It was more about the system. I think we have always tried to, our kids, we play the game. It's not about who's in the dugout. That's hard to do. But if we could get our kids to buy in that, hey, this is how we're going to pitch, this is how we're going to play defense, and this is how we're going to, and hey, let's focus on this inning. We won this inning. And this, we won the next inning. They won an inning. We limit the mistakes on our part of it. But if we play our baseball and we play for each other, then the opponent becomes less of an issue for us.
Gotcha. So in your case, it's more of a play the game. Just let's focus on the game and not focus on the other team. Okay.
Yeah, we used to. Go ahead.
And a second question I had, you said you were the pitching coach at Brookwood. When you transitioned from a position that's obviously very important on any staff as the pitching guy, how long did you continue to do pitching, or did you pass that off directly once you became the head coach? Or do you still do pitching now? Is that an area obviously you still focus in, but do you have a pitching coach, and where were you in that situation?
No, I turned that over on day one. That was the best advice I ever got was, Rig, don't try to do both. And it was the best advice because, one, I think it helped me grow as a coach. I would tell anybody you become a head coach, you got to get great people around you. And you need to hire people and you need to leave them alone. Mm-hmm. So what we've been fortunate enough to do is I hire people to do jobs and we talk about philosophy and we hammer out our philosophy. And then once we're hammered out, we've got what we want. And then I expect you to go do your job and get our kids prepared to play.
Gotcha.
It doesn't matter if you're an infield guy, outfield guy, pitching guy. Am I going to go down in the bullpen? I certainly am. But I'm not there for question anybody. I'm not there to step on any toes. I'm there for the kids. Talk to the kids about pitching, talk about our philosophy with them. And those are the kind of things I think is important, is because they want to see the head coach watching them and taking note to what they're doing, where the work is.
Um, kind of lead into or to kind of look at the two different scenarios of you creating a culture. When you were at Brookwood, you were already a part of the culture a little bit when you took over as the head coach, obviously as a voice with the pitching coach. So you were already established a little bit with your culture. So it was probably, I would assume, a little easier transition into creating your culture as the head coach. But when you went to Lambert, you were kind of stepping in and taking over, that you weren't already a part of it. On day one, week one, month one, what are some of the priorities that you take in creating the culture that you want with your program?
Well, I think you're exactly right. And I think that was a challenge I was looking for, honestly. I look back now, there's probably some things I'd wish I'd done a little differently. But I don't think I really looked, again, I was focused on system. I'm very systematic. I like things to be done a certain way. So I pushed system. There's some things that are different in today's game. I'll be honest with you. I think the best thing about creating culture back in the day was that we played summer baseball. We established everything in the summer. I mean, all of us did. That was the amount of time you had with your kids. You had zero distractions. You played tons of kids. You created everything. So I get to Lambert, and that's no longer, and it is what it is. I've got kids. My two boys go and play travel baseball. It is what it is. We can. I'm sure you could have a podcast on that. Will go on for months. And everybody's got a different opinion on it.
We talked about before from South Georgia, we would come up into playing the Parkview Summer Tournament, and to playing the McEachern Woodbat Tournament. That was a big deal.
Oh yeah, it was.
And that's something nowadays you try to explain to kids in high school, and they're like, "Y'all stayed together and played in the summer." It sounds so antiquated to those kids.
It really is, and for us, it was a big deal. We played 35 games. But we took trips. We got charter buses. We were hotel rooms. They had a room with kids. I put them in rooms with kids they didn't know, especially in different classes, got them to know each other. We went rafting. We did that several years. We did World Series. The best thing I think I always enjoyed, I don't think the kids always enjoyed, but we took the last 3 days. So after our last tournament, we would go in that next Monday, and Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, we'd have a camp. And that camp would start at 8 a.m. in the morning, and it would go all day. And they would leave 8, 9 o'clock that evening, go home, come back, and we start the next day. And it was it gave us a chance to go over all of our fundamental stuff, all of our team defense, all of our team offense stuff. And then on that third day, we would play a World Series. And so we had our sophomores, juniors, upcoming sophomores, juniors, and seniors, and we divide into 3 teams, and we'd have a blast. And the kids were the coaches, and whoever was 0-2, they had to clean out the stalls in the bathroom. So there was a punishment there. And then the other group had to vacuum and wipe down walls and do those kind of things, take care of your house. And then the winner didn't have to do anything. Hey, we had parents that would bring breakfast. We had parents that would bring lunch. We had parents that would bring dinner. And it was hot, and you were tired, but you want to talk about building a culture? We got time to sit down with our kids, and we talked about so many things. And honestly, there weren't always baseball items. And so it was phenomenal. I missed it. And that's been the toughest thing for me to get here, because creating the cultures, it's hard. You don't have 4-on-1s are great. Love them. But I've had to come up with different ways. And this all started last year, or really the year, a little bit before, maybe the fall of last year, where I started going, our culture's not where I want it. And so, well, how are we going to change this? How are we going to change this? And I'll tell you the first place. I'll let you go if you got any questions, but I'll tell you where it started. You ready?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
The weight room.
Oh,
hey, man. Yes, sir.
That is the you want to find out about your kids, you go to the weight room. And, go ahead.
Well, you put in your slides that you had. It starts here, and you can't name me a good program across many sports that it doesn't start in the weight room. That's where winning begins.
There's no question, and it was, and I can tell you that from experience. I mean, we always had it at Brookwood, and we started it with Lambert, and I was the only one in there. And I've been fortunate last 2 years, but I'll tell you this, I got out of the weight room and I felt like somebody else ought to be in the weight room. That I was probably on the kids too much. And if there's one thing
your voice becomes the same voice they hear during block schedule or during class. Exactly. Is the same one they hear at 1-on-4s, the same one they hear at practice, the same one they hear in games. And I felt, because I used to do the weight room too, it becomes a little bit of white noise to them.
Yes.
And if they can have somebody else pushing them in that weight room, your voice carries more weight when you're on the field.
You're exactly right. And it's got out, got back in, and I was very fortunate. That time last year, Josh Pritchett was our weight training guy. And I was like, hey, I want you to teach the class. I'm here for a totally different purpose. And I was there to get in their heads. I was to get in there to challenge them. He set up the workouts. He set up all the stuff. I just made sure they were doing, the only thing that I ask is that, hey, we went off the whistle. Everything was off the whistle. And I think that was the greatest thing we ever did last year. Was in a weight room, kids, I don't know how they do it, but kids can get lost in a weight room. They find those corners, they find those places, and they get lost. But when you're on the whistle, you can't get lost. Everybody's on the same, we're all on the same. And so when we're power cleaning, we're all on the whistle and everybody's going at the same time. And so now they're looking at each other. If you're not doing your part, hey, it's and it doesn't have to be a verbal call out. It can just be a stare. It's like, hey, you're not doing your part. And all of a sudden it becomes, now you start seeing it and you're like, oh, holy cow, these guys are getting it. This year we got a new guy in the weight room, Curtis Mateer, and phenomenal. And again, same thing. He's in there. He's calling them out. I'm calling them out. No, you're not doing the right percentages, and you're going to do the percentages right here in front of everybody. Next thing you know, I mean, we're maxing. Kids are screaming and hollering. I got seniors encouraging sophomores, and it's phenomenal. And you're talking about getting a kid that maybe struggles on the baseball field, and all of a sudden he gets in the weight room and he throws, he's on a squat, and all of a sudden he's doing 225, and everybody else starts looking at him a little differently. It's like, he is a lot better. It's there. And then that kid, all of a sudden his chest starts poking out, and it changes everything about your program.
Now, do you have most of your baseball kids together in your weight training class?
Yeah, everybody but our football kids.
Gotcha, which is a huge benefit.
It is. And listen, I don't care. I just want them to lift. As long as they're getting it and they're getting after it. Now, us being together, that's a big deal. Now, what we'll do is our seniors will come in to our weight training class in the spring. So it's good to have those football seniors, I should say. They come in the spring, and so they're with us. Because those are your leaders.
Yeah, to me, the reason the weight room's so great is because it's not instant. Like, you have to truly grind in the weight room to get to a certain level. You have to be committed every day. You have to commit to those lifts and following the routine to get to where you want to go. And so many kids, and especially in this day and age, are just looking at, we get on Twitter and somebody's like, oh, just do this and you'll throw 100 miles an hour, or do this and you're going to hit 10,000 home runs in your season, but it's not that process. It's a process of grinding every day and learning that routine and learning about yourself and how to take it to the next level. And that's why so many kids that hide from that process don't want to take the time to grind it out, to see the results. And like you said, when you get to that final day of maxing out and all the kids are super excited, it's finally that journey got to that point. And you've created this culture of, you looked around and you saw everybody grind side by side, and then you get to see the results from that grind together. So it's pretty awesome.
No question. I want to highlight before you go on to something else. This was something, and you talk about culture, but this was something that I found, I don't know, obviously interesting, but such a great learning point. So we went in, Coach Mateer was not there, and he always had all the hype up music and all that. So I get in there, and I'm not the most tech savvy individual. So I get in there, and I can't get the music on. Well, that shuts down everything, because it's like and so it was a great point. So we start talking. I was like, listen, you're not always going to have those outside sources for motivation. Sometimes you just got to grind. And I was like, you know what? We need to have that day in the weight room where there is no music. And that's that day when you come to the ballpark and it's field's wet, it's cold. Nobody's coming to today's game because it's too cold for anybody to come, or you're playing somebody that's struggling right now, or it's like, all right, you got to grind. So it's like, hey, we're weight room day with no music. So what are we going to do? And so we created it. So those kind of things create culture too. I mean, and that was one of the things that hit me. And I was like, all right, now we got something to talk about on those days when we don't feel it.
Yeah.
Hey, you're gonna grind in the weight room with no music.
Which we all know that's the difference in sometimes that region game on a Wednesday or Thursday that your kids aren't into. Can you win that game?
Yeah.
Can you win that game when you're not playing your best? And like you said, the field's yucky and it's nasty. Can you find a way to battle through that game and walk out with a win rather than a loss?
Yeah, anybody can perform when you're feeling great. You really start to see guys separate themselves. Who can perform when you don't feel great, when the conditions aren't perfect, when it's not 74 and sunny, it's cold, rainy. Who's going to step up and really perform in those situations? And the weight room can show that in itself.
No question.
So, Coach, on your little presentation you were going to show at the Dugout Club, you were going to talk about like the language and the jargon that you use, and you had a word, rictatorship. I'm assuming that's a play on your name. Well, can you dive into that a little bit more?
Yes, I think that's. I think language is. It's interesting. When I went back and I was like, all right, I really need to look up culture. We talk about culture, but I mean, what defines a culture? So I went in there and I looked and I was like, holy cow. All right, now let's take this and apply it to baseball. So language is obviously of any culture is very important. And then I started thinking about it. I was like, all right, well, let's talk about language. And to me in baseball, it's more about the jargons, the sayings, the phrases, coach speak. I think you need to play around with kids every once in a while. You need to tease. I mean, yes, you got to get on them, but I think you need to do other little things. So these are a couple of things that I've always, my bad, your fault was always one of the things that I always, so if I messed up, it was my bad, but it was probably your fault that I messed up. And that kind of evolved into, we all have that speech where, you're not going to, this is not a democracy. You're going to do it. This is going to be done my way. And, hey, it's not a dictatorship. And then one of my kids goes, it's a rictatorship, coach. And it just kind of, everybody laughed, but it also caught on. And that was the great part about it was that, all right, Coach Howard is in charge of this, and we're going to run this thing the way Coach Howard wants it. And it's a dictatorship. And so, we talk about that. And then it was kind of funny how it all developed. Little stuff. I go down the hallway, I see one of my kids and say, hey, what's up, little man? And most of them just kind of pass you on by. They don't say, but every once in a while you have like, what? Little man? And then I have to follow it up and hey, that's how I see you, and it's, you want to see that kid that kind of asks and questions and says, what are you talking? Who'd you call a little man? I like that kid, I love to see them with their girlfriends. I'll go up and, hey, who's your friend? And, there's two answers, one's going to be good with her. And one's going to be good with me. And, I want that dude to kind of, I say, coach, this is my girlfriend, but every once in a while you'll get that one and say, oh, coach, this is a friend. Well, then she immediately looks at him, is like, what are you talking about? We're just friends. And then one of the best is I had that happen to one kid at Brooklyn, and she just stormed off. And he's like, Coach, I got to go. I was like, go ahead, buddy. Go right. So, those are the kind of things that I think I do also have some, I tell our guys, you got 4 responses, and it's yes, sir, no, sir, I don't understand, or I screwed up. And I got that from Valdosta State at one of our clinics in the Dugout Club. And to me, that is, don't tell me why, because today, and we all do this. Somebody tells you what you did wrong. First thing you want to do is tell why it went wrong. And I try to let them know I'm not interested in that. What I'm interested in is you learning what it is that I want you to, how I want you to do something. So let's just save all this time. Let's cut out why it happened. I don't want to hear that. What I want you to do is I want you to listen to me tell you how I want it done. And then that's the way we want to get it done. And so it eliminates a little bit of that stuff. And again, I tell our kids, are you listening to argue or are you listening to learn? 90% of the time they're listening to argue. If we get to the point where we're listening to learn, we got a chance.
And
my favorite question to ask a kid is like, a kid makes an error in the field and you'll catch him coming off the field after the inning and you say, can you catch that ball? And he's going to tell you why it was a bad hop, what happened. And it's like, no, that's not what I asked. Can you catch that ball? And the kid will say, well, he'll try to give you the excuse again. Yeah. And you're like, it's not what I asked. Can you catch that ball? Yes, coach, I can catch it. Then catch it next time and let's move on. And try to get kids to understand, like you're saying, is I don't want to hear your excuse. I want to know, can you make that play? Can you hit that guy on there? Do I need to get a pinch hitter in? Tell me what you can and can't do, and let's go win a game.
That's exactly right. And that's the biggest thing, is what them understanding what they can do. No question.
And I think another thing, just the 4 replies to yes, sir, no, sir, kind of on that. A lot of kids don't know how to have conversations. I mean, so many kids just text over the phone to each other that the art of having a conversation with somebody is gone. And I've been, I know I'm a big stickler of this, is like when we're in our indoor, I make sure you say bye when you leave. Like if you just walk outside, you better say bye to us when you walk out that door, because I'm going to do the same to you. I want to know that you are leaving, that you are thankful for your time, whatever it may be, but you need to open that conversation with us and learn how to respect other people's time. So now our players walk out and they're always like making sure they say bye when they say bye. So it's.
I love it.
And you've got a kid like Ben Stewart that we have. Ben Stewart will walk up to each coach, fist bump them, say bye, coach. Thank you, coach.
Yeah.
And that's something we all have kids. Our coaching staff has small children that play rec sports and little travel. I make my kids go tell the coach, thank you after every practice. Thank you after every game. And we try to explain to our high school boys the same thing of, hey, go up there and thank that guy for his time, no matter what it is. Hey, thanks, coach, for this today, because somebody was trying to help you get better today.
I agree with you. And one thing I kind of turned that on is like, we're also going to not make this just something we do just to do and to make everybody feel good. Is like, we're going to look each other in the eye and you're going to mean that fist bump. And it's like, when you say thank you, hey, it better come across to me or whoever that recipient is that you do appreciate deep down what you've done for me today. And so I make sure that if they get nonchalant with it, we're going to stop it and we're going to talk a little bit more about, hey, if we say thank you, then we're going to mean it.
Yeah, I think just having a conversation opens that door to the culture in your program. It also puts you on the level of, I'm able to talk to you about anything. I'm able to have a conversation with you when things are tough, when I do mess up, when something does go wrong, we're still able to have a normal conversation. And it's not, I think a lot of kids take it as, when we start talking, that they get defensive thinking, well, I did this wrong, or look at me, the shame or whatever. And it's not that. It's, let's figure out what happened and how are we going to fix it? And can you do it or not do it? And if you don't know it, then that might reflect back to us that we're doing a poor job of coaching something, and that we need to do a better job of understanding how to deliver that information to that player or the team in general, if everybody's missing it. So the art of conversation is very lost in kids these days, I would say.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
To go a little bit to practice, I'm kind of interested to hear a little bit about the culture that you create in practice. Obviously, we as coaches in season spend as much time with these kids as anybody, probably more than their parents, more than their friends, anything. The culture that you create in practice, I see some of the notes that you've jotted down: pace, BP rounds, attention to details, and your expectations of them in practice. Could you talk a little bit about how you create a culture of high quality practice, pace, and the expectations you set for them?
Yeah, to me, that is where it's funny. We were talking about that today, our coaches. I think that's what sets the tone for everything. I think if you can't ask your kids to play intense for 2.5 hours if you're not going to ask that of them every day of practice. And we were talking, some of my coaches, actually 2 of the ones that we just hired. And, one of the first things I tell them is like, listen, I need you to understand when we go through those first 4 weeks of practices, we're 4 to 8, 4 to 8:30. I mean, and that's what we're going to do. So make sure that that's something you're good with, and you understand that that's going to be the expectation of how we go about this. And we set our practices up. The first 2 hours are going to be our fundamental side of it, our BP and those, and then the back half is going to be a scrimmage, a challenge is what we like to call it. I started doing this because I couldn't see him in the summer. So the style of play that I want, well, I can talk about it all day long, but if they don't play that way, they're not going to understand what it is that I'm asking of them. So we try to take the last 2 hours of every day, and it is going to be a scrimmage, a challenge. So that way our arms get where they are. They're seeing pictures, but our kids understand the intensity and the pace of the game and how we want it to be played. So it all starts off with, and to me, the more specific you are with how you want the intensity, then the little things. If you start paying attention to the little things, when we throw, it's not a chat around time. When we stretch, I don't mind some talking, but it's not going to be a conversation about what went on today at school or how Susie's doing or anything else. It is going to be, I need to get after it here. I need to get stretched because I'm about to go 4 hours. So when we're throwing with intensity. We're hitting in the chest. We're working our arm slot. We're moving our feet. We're catching everything in front of our feet. I think from a coach, the most important thing you can do, and I catch myself doing this, don't stand in the dugout. You better get down there in the middle of them. And again, this also gives you that opportunity to talk to them a little bit. You're not that guy getting on them all the time. You're that guy that's asking them, hey, how did your day go? And they can talk to me about their day, but they're not going to talk to each other about their day. And so now I'm communicating with them and I'm getting a rapport with them. And so we talk about that, and we talk about the practice the day before. If there's somebody that had a bad day before, now I got a great opportunity to talk to them. And talking to them on the field is a lot better than talking to them in an office and in the school building. Hey, that's a place where both of you love to be. And so I think it starts there. When we go into our fundies, it is high intensity. We're moving our feet. We'll take breaks when it's time to take breaks. BP, there's absolutely zero standing around. It is first guy's up, he's taking the ball live off the bat. He better be laying out. He better be able to get every ball he can. Once he lays out and goes, and the next guy steps up and he funnels in behind him. Everything's intense. Everything is to get after it, because if I want them to play that way, we got to practice that way. So that's a big part of what we do.
So talking about just continuing on to practice. So the pace, what are you guys like on a clock? I know you like the whistle inside the weight room, but do you guys follow that routine on the pace, or is it just high intensity, make sure we're moving, we're we're getting to the spot we're supposed to be to, or how do you display the pace of the practice?
Well, and this is where a dictatorship comes into play. So everything's based off of what Rick Howard thinks. And so the dictatorship is I have my coaches, they're in charge of their fundamental groups, and I'm the one that controls the pace. And so when we're going through this and we're doing this, it's going to be, all right, if my focus in our practice schedule was that I want to make sure our infielders are working on this, then that round or that group work is going to be based off the intensity I want off of my infielders. Hey, we're still working hard on everything else, but I'm going to rotate it off of what we're doing with our infielders, because that was in devising my schedule for practice that day. That was the area that I wanted to get the most done. And so if we focus on that, and I'm going to rotate everything off of that. So in our group work today, that's the most important thing we're going to do of the day. Then I'm going to make sure we rotate off of that. It is not necessarily clocked. It is about, hey, we're bouncing where we need to be. If we're running our bunt picks, first and third situations, then it's boom, first guy's up, he's going to throw, he messes up. I'm not going to sit there and go over with him what he messed up. He's off. Next guy's in. My pitching coach now is with that pitcher, and he's going to correct whatever it is that he did wrong. And now I've continued the pace of practice that day, but he's also getting the instruction. But I didn't slow anybody else from getting reps. And so that's kind of how we coordinate everything. There's a time and a rhyme and a reason to what we're doing it. But I don't like the horn, because there may be, I know in football that's something new. And I'll tell you, I got this from Augie Garrido. I was very fortunate. I got a chance to go fly into Texas when he first got to Texas. And from Friday night through Monday, I got to go around to every practice, walk beside him, talk about it. And that was his thing. And he said, I used to love to watch basketball practice because the pace of the practice was phenomenal. And that was where I got it from. And that was how I wanted practices to be run, because I think kids enjoy that. Is it not the most frustrating thing to do, to go to the ballpark and watch kids sitting around, standing around? It drives me crazy. And you know who it really drives is those kids out there. Baseball's not a boring game unless you make it that way. You know, the intensity, especially from the mental side of it. You know, when we're doing BP, our outfielders, we use the dial pad, the first round through, then we're going to take everything off of 3. And then I'm going to yell out in the second round that, hey, we're taking everything off of 9. So every round needs to be different, that our kids are taking the ball. Obviously, I can work that off if we're doing hitting runs, whatever it is. But now I've created the intensity. They understand, all right, I'm not just here shagging balls. I'm actually working on a specific of how I want this done. And they love it. They absolutely love it. So that increases. That's the intensity I'm talking about. That is the pace that I'm talking about. I think you can do that with a watch, but I think it's different when the expectation is you're working towards something. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, we always talk about the fact that baseball practice is fun. Like high school baseball practice, the only hard part about it is the weather. That first month in January, you're fighting the weather as far as when's the sun going to go down and when does it go from 45 degrees to 32, and it's miserable. But if like you're talking about with pace and intensity and quickly moving from things to things, kids who've never practiced that way realize how fun baseball practice can be compared to one guy taking a ball off a fungo and 8 guys standing around. And I think you're right. When you create pace and those kids understand that, man, I can get a lot of work done and it's a lot of fun, but it's all about the intensity that we go about it with.
Oh, there's no question. I mean, that's what they love. That's what they want. I mean, they want to gain as much knowledge as they can and feel like when they leave the field, it's like, man, I'm worn out. I mean, that's the way they leave the weight room, right?
Yep.
You got them addicted to that in the weight room. Well, you got to do the same thing out there.
Well, then it translates to the field. I mean, I think there's a huge difference from a coaching standpoint when you get up against a team that is high intensity. You feel the pressure of them wanting to move fast. Their pitchers getting on the mound, taking control of the game. dictating what's going on, and the other team can kind of get overwhelmed sometimes and be like, oh my goodness, like, it just translates. And I feel like we'd gotten in that situation early when we first kind of took over, and then building our practices that were high intensity. I feel we put the pressure on other teams when we walk up, that first hitter or that first pitch is thrown, it's go time. Like, the intensity picks up. And I think that's totally translated from in practice, always moving, being on the move, getting high intensity reps. It's easy to translate that into the game.
I agree. Go ahead, Jay.
Well, and my coaches know this, and you'll laugh at this, Coach. We had a young man move in from out of state last year and played on our varsity team, and he was on a championship level team at this school in the Northeast, and he got into a regular season high school Georgia baseball game, and he was like, this is crazy. Yeah. This is super intense. And we're like, this is just a regular season game. And for that kid who was like, Coach, we played the state championship game in New Hampshire. It was not this intense. And we're like, well, this is a Wednesday in February. That's all this is down here.
Yeah.
And so for that kid, you could see when that intensity hit him and he saw that the level everybody was playing at, he's like, Coach, this is nuts the way these teams are going at each other. And I'm like, oh, it's just another day in Georgia high school baseball.
That's exactly right. Yes. I mean, I love when you get kids from out of state they come in and they're like, all right, Coach, I like this. I mean, because they don't get that anywhere else. I mean, it's intense. I love it.
So, yeah. And kind of moving into talking about drinking the Kool-Aid. So, I mean, you got these high intensity practices. We've hit the weight room. We got the language. How do you invite kids to drink the Kool-Aid? How do you get them involved? How do you get them to buy in? Is it something that's just they pick up from other people, or is it something that you really take a focus on behind the scenes of, setting kids up to drink the Kool-Aid without even kind of knowing it?
Well, and I think that's the trick. And I'll say this, and I made that comment on there. If they're not drinking out of the same pitcher, then you don't have them all on the same page. And that's, to me, that's a big deal. I think it starts, I think you're a freshman. I think you got a freshman team and you got a freshman coach. And I've been fortunate to have some phenomenal freshman coaches. It starts right there. The number one thing, and I think, Jay, you touched on this a little bit, is the intensity. Well, I think the first thing most kids have trouble in high school is, and we're going to practice 6 days a week. We're going to go 6 days a week. We're not going to go twice a week. We're going to go 6 days a week. I mean, and that's, I think, the first thing. And so you start setting the tone of what the expectations are. You get into that sophomore year and all of a sudden, so our freshmen are not in our weight training class. They start getting in their sophomore. And to me, your seniors and your juniors are going to have to be the ones. One, they're going to call those sophomores out for the work ethic in here goes this level, and you're going to have to step up your level. And then those seniors at the same time got to start celebrating those sophomores when they do buy into what they're doing. And now all of a sudden you've closed that gap. And so now what you've created is, hey, we're all one. We're a unit now. So now I got sophomores that are buying in because I got seniors doing what they're supposed to be doing. And so it starts spreading. One thing that we do, I think you got to get into the school. So we do senior nights, and each kid gets their own senior night. So that means they get 5 or 6 minutes before the game. It's all about them. Now, once the game starts, it's about us. So one thing we do is they get to select a teacher to come out and throw the first pitch. Well, now that teacher's involved in our program. So that's huge. Fundraisers. We do firewood. We make a little money off of firewood, but I'll tell you what, the greatest thing we do is they get up every Saturday in the fall. We load their trucks up and we go to people in our community and we deliver and we stack firewood. And I get emails, or our parents get emails, hey, your kids were awesome today. They're polite kids. They worked their tails off. They did what I asked them to do. They had to carry firewood up, the side of a mountain, whatever it is. now I've got the community into this thing. And so to me, that is the Kool-Aid, and say, hey, we're all buying into this, where this is important to us. And now we're creating that, we're creating that culture. That's what we're doing. And so now they're all buying into, hey, it's about all of us. Now we got them going.
Yeah, I think an awesome thing that you said was celebrating that player. You know, whether I know a lot of times it's about the big team thing, but at some point it needs a little time for that kid to be recognized that we saw all the hard work you put in for the last 4 years. We've seen the blood and sweat and whatever it is to show that commitment. And we're appreciative of that, and we thank your time as much as because the truth is those kids are what's going to pass it down to the next kid. We can put it in place. Go ahead.
Well, I think it also, you're not going to be successful without role players, and to me that is probably one of the most important things. I think in celebrating those kids, you better take those role guys and you better make a big emphasis on them. And there's no question when you finish a game and somebody hit a game winner, hey, we all know who hit the game winner, right? But who created that opportunity for that guy to hit it? You better celebrate that guy, because without that guy, you don't have a game winner. And so that is that role play, and that's the whole thing, is that team building concept. I mean, and to me, it's more about talking about the game and how that kid played a role in the game. It goes back to what we talked about all the time. It's, these kids, it's not the process, it's the end result they want to celebrate. Well, let's remind them how we got to that end result. People played a part in us being able to get to that end result. And without those people, no matter how big or small that role was, we're not here without them. And that's a big part of it. So I try to, we're going to celebrate the guy that had 10 Ks that day pitching on the bump. But we're also going to celebrate one or two role players that made a huge impact in us being able to be successful as a team. And that's a big part of it.
Might be the catcher that blocked 7 curveballs in the dirt that were all for strikeouts. So,
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So, what about, I know just kind of touching on this, I just wanted to see this presentation of player packs. What exactly is that? It says holidays, player packs, kind of what's the idea behind that?
Well, when we were going, and again, I was looking up cultures, and part of a culture is holidays, and I used to laugh. So we, obviously our kid, we make cuts and all that in January, and then so once we make those final cuts, they come in on that Saturday, and then that Saturday, our coaches would put together all their stuff, all their hoodies and everything, and we'd put it in their bag, and we would put it in their locker room. And so they would come in, and I really didn't pay much attention. One of our kids came in, he's like, "Coach, this is like Christmas in January." And I was like, I mean, they love it, and I was like, so that was our holiday, it was the day that they came in, and hey, they were excited about being a part of the program. They got something, there was a gift there for them. And so that's our holidays, and we celebrate. I mean, they love that day. And, if you got the money in your program to spend on your kids, there's nothing they like more than wearing gear with your team name on there. And then the sense of pride that those kids have about that, it kind of takes you back a little bit, and you appreciate where they're coming from and how, it's a big deal. And sometimes we forget that.
Well, so many of them, high school is going to be, I don't want to say this in a bad way, but high school's some of those kids' greatest moments, and being a part, and it's really the only time they'll ever really be a part of a team and understand what it's like to work together and work towards something and put all that time in to achieve something together. So, you look back, and a lot of people look at these as your greatest moments, and they should be celebrated, and they should be understood that, this kid has put that time and sweat that we've asked him to put into, and it means a lot to him, whether we realize it or not.
I agree. I'll tell you a great, this year I brought in some guys from our 12 team to come and talk to our group. So they came on 7 o'clock in the morning on a Friday. Only 2 of them could make it. They were from our 12 team that lost in the state championship. And like, Coach, what do you want to talk about? And I said, I want you guys to just talk. I want you to talk about your experience. I want you to talk about, just everything. I don't want to control the conversation. So they came in and they did a great job. But one of the things that I was kind of floored by, both of these kids played college baseball, very successful college careers. And they're like, I'm telling you, the most fun that I've had in my career was high school baseball in the playoffs. And it's like,
oh yeah,
you can't beat that. And I'm like,
Nope.
Here are these guys. They had conference championships. They got rings, and one of them was an All-American. And what does he take away was, obviously that year we played for state championship, so it was pretty special, but that was a big deal to him. And it kind of took me back a little bit. And I sometimes we forget how much this stuff means to these guys. And not the wins and the losses, just the excitement, the enthusiasm, the hard work, the process, the things that we always talk about. We're getting to them. We are getting to them.
The bus rides, the conversations after practice, the stopping to eat a meal, that just stupid stuff that happens between the kids that they remember for a lifetime. One of our big ones is we had Dom Hughes, who played for us and is at Kansas State now, but he used to sing on the bus, like we get a win and everybody's like hurrying back to the bus because we know Dom's about to start singing. So we get all there. So, still talked about, and then it carried into him singing a song after every game, after every win at our field that year. And it's one of those memories you look back and like, I honestly couldn't tell you the record from that season, but I know we played well and we had a good culture there. And those things stick out, not the wins and losses, like you said.
Oh, without a doubt. And that's why we do it, gentlemen.
go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect segue. We actually got a question on Twitter. Somebody sent in a question on Twitter. At Jacob Oldno asked a question. How do you, Coach, make it a priority to stay in touch with your players? I think some of the most fun that we have is telling these stories about old players, and now you can reach out with them through a text message and hopefully talk to them on the phone. But how do you, make it a priority to stay in touch with some of your former players?
Well, I'm going to tell you this. I can assure you, Jacob Oldno is going to listen to this.
Hey, here we go. Welcome, Jacob.
Yeah.
He may be the only one tonight, gentlemen, but he's going to be listening. And Jacob is one of my favorite people of all time. And I'm going to tell you this story because, again, this is what it's about. Jake was our manager, Jacob, cerebral palsy. And Jacob came in as a freshman, and he wanted to be a manager. And you talking about just passion and heart. And so I said, that's fine. His dad, we talked a little bit. And the problem was going to be Jacob had to get on the bus without his walker. And so that was a big deal to Jacob, because he didn't leave that walker. And the only way he could get on that bus, the bus driver wouldn't let him on there unless he could climb the steps. So we got our first road game, and I get a text from Jacob, and he's homesick. Well, I knew he wasn't homesick. Jacob didn't want to climb those steps. He was afraid he wasn't going to get up those steps. So I told him, it's like, the only way you're going to be a manager is if you can climb those steps. And so second bus trip, he's there, and he's scared to death. And but he got up those steps, and he was celebrated when he got on the bus, and our team. And those are the kind of things, those kids stood up and applauded for him. And you're talking about, your heart racing, and because that kid accomplished something. And that was one of my best coaching memories. And I have 28 years of doing this, and he continued to be our manager and phenomenal individual. And but you got to reach out to your kids, and I'm not very good at it. I'm not a social media guy, but I can tell you this: I always make sure I talk to Jacob Olno because he's been a big part of my life.
That's awesome.
That's what it's all about there.
Yep.
Well, that's a tough segue. Well, so just kind of getting towards the end of this and just kind of talking and looking at this, you finished up with kind of talking about strong versus weak kind of culture in your program. And can you touch on what the strong means and what the weak means and just kind of how that finishes everything off?
Well, I'm actually going to reverse a little bit, and I'm going to tell you, I'm going to talk about the week because this is when I felt like we weren't doing a good enough job in creating a culture at Lambert. Our first 2 years there, we won 2 region titles, and we were rolling. But I can still look back and think that I really wasn't comfortable. I didn't feel like we were challenging our kids, and we weren't. But I didn't make the moves that I needed to make. Because when you're winning, you don't like to change things. So we start struggling, and then we're in that third year. I told you we did senior nights, and so this particular night we had senior night for this young man, and then we get into the game, and it's a region game, and we're down 4-0. And I'm a little frustrated, and we're not playing very well. And but one of our kids gets up there, we get 2 on, and he hits a 3-run jack, and I'm pumped because we're back in this thing. And the kid's coming into the dugout, and he's celebrating, and one of the kids goes, "Man, that is awesome. You hit a home run on your senior night." And I thought to myself, how is that the first thing that we're going to celebrate? We're in a 4-3 ball game now in a tight region, and we're celebrating an individual accomplishment. And it kind of hit me that we're not doing what we need to be doing. We're not approaching this the right way. And so I felt like at that point in time, then I started looking around, and I'm like, all right, in the weight room, I'm not in the weight room. We're not doing the things we need to be doing in the weight room. On the field, we're not talking team enough. We're not celebrating those things are important. So it became evident. Don't get me wrong. That wasn't the only thing that I noticed, but I saw, hey, we're not where we need to be. We're without a question. So that's when I started looking at culture. And, I got stats in there because when we start talking about stats, we're no longer talking about us. We're talking about individual stuff. And I celebrate individuals. I think that's important, but I like to celebrate them at the end. I'll tell you this, started turning some rings around. Last year I had, my oldest son was on our team, and you want to know if you're reaching kids, at the end of the year, our last game, if your kids aren't crying and they're not upset, you're missing something. And so my son, obviously we got shut down, and he says, Dad, I think the one thing I'm going to miss the most is that we didn't get to say bye on the field with you. And that tore me up, for one, as a dad, but 2, it tore me up as a coach because I realized that meant something to him, and it meant something to the other guys, because that was our opportunity to say, I love you. I appreciate you. You're always a part of this, and I never hugged my kids' necks until they're seniors and they played their last year, because so much goes on. If I get too much as a junior, then I'm going to lose that a little bit. And so I don't hug their necks until after they graduate. Now, every time I see them after they graduate, I hug their neck because they're one of us. And, that took me, that's when I kind of realized, all right, hey, we're starting to get this thing going back, where those things mean a lot to them, and not the end results, but the love you have for each other, the work you put into each other, and it's a big part of their life. And so you got a strong culture when those things matter, and that's what you want to build off of.
Yeah, and as coaches in just general, the ability to reflect on your actions and what you're doing and the process you're doing, it goes a long way, because a lot of times we get so focused on what we're trying to accomplish, and if you don't realize that it's not working, you just keep beating your head in the wall. And so stepping back, looking at that and understanding what your concrete beliefs are and how are we going to get there, is a huge thing. So just on the strength sides, I imagine it's more, we start looking at more of the team understanding of where we're going. Set of habits, traditions, symbols, those things. And how do you really try to influence those things to get that strong side?
Well, I think, traditions is a big part of it. And I think you talked about is the traditions of, number one, you recognize your kids. So somewhere in your program, there needs to be something your kids who've gone on to play college baseball or pro baseball or whatever it is, there needs to be recognition. You got to have banners recognizing team accomplishments. I think, one thing that we do is we have a saying shirt every year. Last year's shirt was we either win or we learn. And, and that slogan was huge for us because we always focused on losing. And we're so afraid of losing. And then when we took that out of it, and then our focus was on learning, we had some success. To me, that's a big part. Kids like to expect, they like stability. They don't like to say it, but they like that stability of when they know when we go in August, I'm going to give them the first 2 weeks, and then we're going to start 4-on-1s. And 4-on-1s are going to go through the end of October. They know that we're going to do 4-on-1s to the end of October. And they know, and in November comes the dreaded 220s on Thursday. And so we're going to condition Tuesdays and Thursdays, and they got dreaded 220s. And they hate 220s, but they love when they get them done. And they know that we're going to do that. And we got a conditioning test when we come back in January. So those things, those habits, those traditions, those things that form, create that culture they can hold on to and go, this is what we're going to do, especially when you've got the scenario that we all have and kids are wondering, we lost it last year, what's going to happen this year? Well, they got something every day they can come into. That's the weight room, that's 4-on-1s, and that's conditioning, and they can hold on to that because they're sure that that's going to be there for them. So that's important to it. I put walk the talk. If you can't walk it, guys, it's going to be hard to get your kids to be. And let me say this: the greatest resource you have are your assistant coaches. They are
Amen.
Our success is because of our assistant coaches. I'll tell you every day of the week that our success is because of our assistant coaches, either Brookwood or Lambert. I have been very fortunate to have some quality men around me, and my players have been very fortunate to have some quality men around them. And you want to sell your program, it's your assistant coaches, no doubt about it.
Yeah. We kind of touched on that last week with Coach Strickland from Marist, was the Coach Lasley, the ability that he's given us to take the responsibility and have the accountability for our positions and our players in those positions goes a humongous way. And also it forces, I feel like it forces the kids to understand that the head coach trusts us just as much as he trusts himself with those kids. Like, you better learn to trust these guys. And in that, it forces them to create relationships with us. And,
Amen.
and it just blossoms from there. And then on top of it, from our side, is we're passing along the ideas and the culture of the program from the head coach to those kids. So it's kind of working together in both ways. We pass it along, and then those kids give it back to us to pass back to the head coach. And
I agree with 100%. And I'll tell you something, that relationship that those kids have with an assistant coach, I mean, it's phenomenal. I mean, it really does create the atmosphere that you want as a head coach, because now you get a chance to do your job as a head coach, and you take in the stress. You know, I always want to take the stress off my kids. I want to take the stress off of my coaches. Let me take that. Y'all go do the things that you love to do. And I trust you. I 100% believe in you. And we've already talked and we got a philosophy. So let's go to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, you know.
Well, and that relationship, Tom and Coach, you could probably agree with this. That kid, when he's comfortable with his hitting coach, he's comfortable with his pitching coach, and he has that relationship, they're going to that guy first before they come to you.
Yes.
As a head coach, you get the big problem, or you get the when it's at the end.
Yes.
But problems get solved, or kids feel comfortable when they can go to that coach and say, hey, this is going on, or I'm not feeling this, or this is happening, not only from an on-field standpoint, but just whatever it is that pitching coach, that hitting coach, that catching coach, that's going to be their first line of communication is to that guy. Because sometimes they think if they come to you, they're going to get in trouble or it's going to be a bad thing. And so having coaches who take responsibility, who have relationships with their players, that's going to be the first place they go to.
Yeah, and that's where you want to, and that's where they need to go, because, you know, I always tell them, I got to write out a lineup, you know, so our conversation is going to be different than it's going to be with one of my assistants, and it needs to be. I mean, they need to have that guy to go to, because I'm going to be hard on them, and I'm going to be demanding on them, and they need somebody. They need somebody to talk to that about, no question.
Well, and also from a head coaching standpoint, I've never been a head coach, but this is how I feel, is that there's, 40 plus kids in our program. It's impossible for our head coach to have a personal relationship with every single kid in that program, like a downright personal relationship. And we are able to take those smaller groups and create that more personal situation, but also we get the benefit of taking information from Coach Lasley about that player and relay it to him. Say, no, Coach Lasley, he sees what you're doing, man. It's not going like, and it's hard for, I guess, the personal relationship. What I'm trying to say is, it's hard for you as a head coach to get to every kid and go, man, you're doing this great, you're doing this great, you're doing this great, and then move to the next kid and say, you're doing this great, you're doing this great. We get to be able to do that buffer and be like, hey, coach came to me and said this, and you're doing it great. Keep working at it. You got this. Coach knows, he sees it. It's going to happen. So, and for us to be able to create that relationship of giving that positivity and relaying, and knowing that we have that great relationship with Coach Lasley, the head coach, whatever it may be, whoever it may be, is a huge thing for the whole culture of the program. That we're all on the same page. We're all moving in the same direction.
That's why I don't hug their neck till after they graduate, because I still got to make decisions on them. I mean, it's tough.
Oh yeah, big time.
So
well, and we talked about you kind of like talk about practices. Somebody made this statement. Coach Strickland made it last week. Until you have kids, you don't understand what it means. And you're way ahead now. You've got a son who's in high school. I can only imagine is understanding that, and I take away from this. Sometimes I get caught in the Groundhog Day of another season, another January, and what we're trying to accomplish. And like Tom said earlier, this is a big moment for those guys. Most of these seniors will not play another sport after high school. And sometimes I know as a head coach, I have to remind myself of, hey, this is a big moment for this guy. And like you're talking about, of celebrating those moments, because that kid's going to remember that when he's 25, when he's 35 years old.
Oh, you better believe it.
And I think sometimes as a head coach, you got to remind yourself, it's, hey, don't get caught in Groundhog Day if this is just another BP session. This is a moment that this kid might remember, whatever it is.
You're exactly right, 100% of the time. And even if they do go play, like that player said, his best times were in high school. And I mean, it was like, you forget the impact that you have. It's huge.
Have you ever had, say one of your better players, one of the guys you're really leaning on from production in the season, that just hasn't bought in? And you don't have to say names or anything, but have you ever had a situation where they're kind of fighting it, and it's just that individual, like, I'm going to do my thing. I want to be here because I want to play baseball and be a part of the team, but I'm still going to do my own thing. while everybody in the other side is trying to work together to move in the right direction. And how did you get that kid to move into the right direction, or as you said, come drink the Kool-Aid?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I think all of us, if you've coached long enough, you've had that situation, and you've had that situation where you reached that kid, and you've had situations where you didn't reach that kid. And I can think relatively just a year or two ago where I had some kids I didn't reach 2 to 3 years ago, but I wish I was able to, but we weren't. And I can certainly think about some kids that we were able to reach. And funny enough, the kid that made the comment about his best, he and I went to blows, and then he'll tell you, he was like, he was stubborn. He wouldn't listen. I told him, I got frustrated with him. I told him he needed to come back tomorrow at 6 a.m. I said he went home and told everybody that he thought I was kicking him off the team. And came back that morning. We pay the piper when we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. And so when you pay the piper, it's a little conditioning. And so he paid the piper that morning. He had about 4 of them, which is pretty strenuous. And I told him we weren't going to do this anymore. And he was either going to buy into what we were doing or he wasn't going to be a part of it. And he told me that day, which was just a couple of weeks ago, that changed him. And
that's awesome.
There he is speaking to my kids about it. You know what I mean? I mean, it was great.
What about? I always laughed at.
Go ahead,
I laugh to myself that sometimes the longest relationship I have with players is not with my starting shortstop or my starting pitcher, but it's that kid who was just hitting in the 9-hole, may have never played. That's the kid that I'm texting with 10 years later.
Oh yeah.
And it's not necessarily your best players are the ones that you end up as a head coach having the longest relationship with.
Oh, there's no question. And your best players, not always. I've got some of the best players that don't talk, and that's fine. I mean, that's just part of, you're gonna have differences in personality and those kind of things. And there was probably some things I could have done differently, and we all look back on those things. But I was probably doing what I thought was the right thing to do at the time. And that's where assistant coaches are huge, because if I wasn't, I had some guys that I get there and say, hey, am I doing right by this kid? And they'd say, no, you weren't, or yes, you were. And I knew they were going to be honest with me. And that was huge for me. And, but you're right. The impact, because you don't know how you're going to impact a kid, and you don't know. And again, they don't talk. We created the chair, where we go and we force them to sit in a chair. And in that chair, somebody in the room is going to tell them 2 things they like about them and 2 things that they don't like about them. And they got to listen to both of them. And the chair is huge. But that's the only time we can get kids to talk sometimes is when they're in the chair. And they can't argue, and so they got to take both of them. But you start to get a feel for who those kids are. And then to each other, they start to get a feel for what the other one's thinking. And it opens up some communication. So, I think that's important.
Yeah. There was one last thing and it's kind of going back into this, and then I don't mean to drag this on, but what about coming into Lambert? Like, I know one thing is taking in that senior class when you come into, they had a head coach before. I don't really know the relationship before that was that coach. Did he just move on, or was he kind of forced out? And so those seniors were looking for a new one.
Go ahead. It was an interesting scenario for us, because it was unlike any other. So in 2014, they won a national championship. And then Coach Core got an opportunity to go to a junior college down in Florida and start a new program there. So what I thought was a great job by the administration, because it was a July decision, instead of just hiring somebody, they did an interim basis. So the AD took it over. Who was a great baseball guy himself. So he did it for a year. So when I came into this group of seniors, they were on their 3rd coach in 3 years. and they had won a national championship. And then the year of the interim coach, had a phenomenal regular season, won the region, but they got beat in the first round. So here you had two very different endings. And so I cannot say enough about that first group. I mean, you talking about buying in, they were all in. They were all in, and they were all about it. And that was probably, you know, I didn't have to do a lot. I mean, they were ready. They wanted it. They wanted it. I mean, they wanted to be a part of what they saw in 14, and they never wanted for 15 to ever happen again, you know. And it was funny in that course of the season, we got to a point where we were struggling, and that was one of the things that we talked about. I said, listen, you need to understand, you're not 14, you're not 15.
Yeah,
you are 16, and you need to celebrate 16. And from that point on, it made the point, and they decided, hey, we're going to be us, and we're going to see how far us takes us. And hey, we got to Elite Eight that year, and it was a highlight of my coaching career because I loved it.
That's awesome. Any other questions, or you guys anything you want to? Lasley, Kelly, good.
That was great. Yeah, that was good.
Yeah.
Well, Coach,
Let me just
go ahead.
Let me say this. First of all, I love this. I love what you guys are doing for high school athletics, because this is what it's about, and it's been truly an honor to be a part of this. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Coach, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us. It's just a lot of information, and we appreciate it so much for taking the time and talking to us. I know we just started up. This is our 4th episode, and just the ability for Georgia coaches to come on and talk about their experiences and what they've gone through and how they've created their culture at their schools is just is a true blessing for you guys to do that. And I hope we help some coach out there that's in the middle of this, struggling to figure out their way or coming into a new coaching opportunity, whatever it may be. It's a really awesome experience for you to come on here and talk to us about creating that culture inside of a program. One last thing, the last question I'd like to end on is, if you're giving one piece of advice to a new coach or a coach starting a new job, what would that thing be coming into it?
Be you.
Be you.
Be you every day of the week. Be you.
I love it. And that seems like a running theme. Coach Turco was on here. He's talking about being you, standing up, yelling bam, and getting the swings in. He was definitely you. And same thing with
be you. That's what they're going to react to, you.
And we talked about this with Coach Strickland. Kids know when you're not you.
Oh,
they know when you're not, you know, they know when you're being fake about things. They want to know you and have that relation. And that's what this whole conversation, as I'm sitting here and I've got your speech in the background, the only thing I can sit here and I come back to is this is relationships. This is you building a relationship with individuals, you building relationship with a group of seniors or a group of freshmen. And I think, Lord knows, none of us coach high school baseball for the pay.
Yeah,
we're here for the kids, and we're here for that relationship that we have with those kids, and knowing that I would probably say all 5 of us, there was a coach who made an impact. And if there's a young guy listening to this, just understand that impact that you're going to have on a kid, because he's going to coach some travel ball team or a little league team, and he's going to coach the same way that you coached him. And so that coaching gets passed on, and that relationship gets passed on after we're gone.
Amen.
Awesome. All right. Well, that wraps it up for another episode of the Attack Angle. Coach Howard, thank you once again for taking the time to come on and talk to us. We appreciate everything you do and allowing us this experience. And I hope you guys all have happy holidays. Be safe. And I wish you guys the best. And like Coach Howard said, be you. Go out there and do your thing. Keep working, keep going ahead and helping those kids out. We appreciate it. Coach Howard, we thank you for your time, and we will see you guys again for another episode. Have a good one.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.
Best of luck to you.
You too, Coach.